Well, hello everyone. Friday night. How are you? Good to see everyone. Well, I hope wherever you are, it is either you're keeping warm or, if it's summertime, you're keeping cool. I'd like you to welcome our special
Hello,
guest tonight.
everyone.
Hold on
Friday
one sec.
night. How are you?
We need to hear myself again in that. So I'd like you to introduce Brenda Fisher. Brenda, welcome. How are you?
Hello.
Good to see
Hi,
you.
Wayne. Hi, chat room.
Yes, well, it's starting to fill in now. So, hello, everyone. Hello, Brian. How are you? Rachel, Kenneth, everyone in here. So, Rachel, thank you for coming on. I've been trying to get you on for some time, and here you are. So, welcome. Can you hear me? Brenda?
Oh, yes.
Okay. I wanted to make sure that the audio is here. So good. Well, thank you for coming on.
Thank you for inviting me. Sorry, that's my phone. Let me silence.
That's okay.
I will. That's typical, right? Where if you forget to silence it, it's bound off.
Yep. Yep. It happens all those times of the most inopportune moment.
All right. I think that thing should be quiet now. All right.
So you have been doing some interesting research. And you and I were just talking before we went on the air that what you've been looking into this about 6 weeks. Is that right?
That's about right. I think I started this probably the end of December or the very beginning of January. So, yep, that's about the right time frame.
So, hello everyone. Hello, Sue G, Claudette. Good to see everyone. So, it's been interesting because you and I have communicated by email, and you were continually finding more and more articles that were indicating and validating that we are, in fact, in the midst of a magnetic pole shift. Is that what your research that you looked into this concluded to?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. As you know, it all started with an initial article, which I think you've got the link to that, and that was the one regarding just a small little news blurb that came out and came across as a notification for me on a airport runway number change in Wichita. Now, this is a regional airport that has 3 runways, so we're not talking about a major transportation hub. But for whatever reason, this garnered a lot of national media attention. And essentially, this just talked about the amount of money that was going to be involved for Wichita in renumbering the runway. But what was interesting to me, separate and apart from their actually doing the runway renumbering for their 3 runways, was why they were doing the renumbering. And the reason for that was that they were no longer labeled correctly in terms of the number of degrees of deviation from true north, because the compass headings, of course, bear magnetic north, which is different than the geographical true north. So I found it fascinating that the degrees of differentiation had changed enough to warrant them having to renumber runways. And it was a rabbit hole that I didn't really intend to go down. But
never is. I swear it never is.
Looking into this, it was just one thing kind of led to another. And so I was fascinated by this, and I've got the hard copy of the articles, which if I look down, I'm looking at the stuff I highlighted on those. But this is the first time Wichita has had to renumber in its 64-year history. So it had not had to do any renumbering for 64 years, and suddenly they're looking at least a 3-degree change in orientation from where they were. The FAA's, this is part of what I learned, is that the FAA has set that standard that if there are 3 degrees, oh, here comes a cat. Oh,
that's okay. Cats are drawn to this broadcast. I mean, I don't know what it is. They are. I mean, it just, it's good vibes.
It's the magnetic personalities here.
That's what it is.
We are talking about magnetism tonight. So In any case, it was interesting because 3 degrees or more will prompt a reassignment in the runway numbers, just so that those are labeled accurately for navigational purposes, obviously for pilots. So it was interesting to me that Wichita was looking at this for the first time in 64 years. That prompted the question for me as to how many other airports have renumbered. And that was, I think, my next communication to you, because I began looking to see, you know, how unique is this phenomenon? Have other airports had to do it? If so, which ones, and when did that happen? And what I was able to locate was some information, and you mentioned it and read, I think, from that email on a previous show. But Tampa International and Peter O'Knight in Florida, they both renumbered in 2011. And then you had Oakland International in California in 2013, John Wayne Airport renumbering in 2014, and then Boeing Field in Washington State and McCarran International in Las Vegas renumbered, I believe, also in 2014. And what we were talking about, what you and I think Jeff talked about on the show where you mentioned that, is that McCarran in Las Vegas had a 4-degree change from when they had last been assessed.
And I don't think people understand how a deviation of 4 degrees, folks, if you're piloting and you have to file a flight plan, you better be right on what your destination is, on the bearing you're taking. And if you're half a degree off, you could be 100, 125 miles off from your target. 4 degrees, Brenda, that's huge.
Yeah, it's a significant departure from where they were. Oakland had not had to renumber for a century.
A century.
Yeah.
Wow.
According to the article I read, this was their first renumbering in 100 years. Boeing had not renumbered for 50. So they renumbered, and then Wichita first time in 64 years. So it was just very interesting to see the number of airports that were impacted by that. And then one of the other links that I sent you was the article from NBAA. And that talks about the changes in runways, where magnetic north is distinct from geomagnetic north. But it talks about the fact that in the NBAA article, it was showing us that magnetic north, the magnetic north pole, is moving at a rate of about 40 miles an hour. And what caught my eye in that particular article was that they noted, the article I'm quoting from was written in 2011. And so it said in the past 10 years, the speed with which magnetic north is migrating and moving had increased 36% from its previous rate of speed.
36%, that's huge.
That is huge. And you can see that again on, Wayne, one of the links I sent you that's on the NOAA website, that there's a link there that will show the dip poles for magnetic north and south. It will show both.
We'll look at that. Can you see this right up here?
I can see it.
Okay, so just to let everyone know, this is a real time. What we're actually seeing is deviation to the magnetic fields right here. This is the XYZ cut. So we can actually, and I'm just showing these to people to Brenda so they can get an idea of how much our planet is actually moving. And when you watch this, I've seen it at times just absolutely rocking and rolling. So this is a cool tool to use if you ever want to see that. I don't know if you've ever gone to this website, Brenda, but it's a great website.
I will check that one out. I think that I have seen the different XYZ cut, the one back when you and Steve did shows together.
Yep.
Yep,
Yep.
I've seen that one, but I don't think I've seen this one before.
Yes, this is Karuna, and this is showing that we've taken a hit right here. This is the electron drop, and it's all relevant to what we're about to really get into the articles that you have sent forward. So you can see the folks up here. We can leave the link when I post this, but it gives you a good chance of, here's ACE. ACE is the satellite that warns us ahead of time. And you can see right here, we got hit. Electrons just dropped out. So getting into your articles, here's the first one, Newsweek, right?
Well, yeah, that was the most recent one actually that came out. So I think that was
Good.
one of the last ones that I sent to you.
Yes.
The Newsweek article was noteworthy only because it was very, very recent. And it speaks directly to the fact that scientists and researchers who have been working on this for a long period of time are pretty much in agreement at this point that all of the indicators are pointing towards a magnetic pole reversal. And in fact, I think there's a strong case to be made that that's already in progress.
I would agree with that conclusion. And I think we're seeing more and more what I would call not mainstream, but where we find people like Ben Davidson and others that this is happening. This is actually happening. Now, what's going to happen, we don't know. So I found this one real interesting. So we're going to kind of go backwards in here. So here's where we talk about the Wichita airport.
Mm-hmm.
And this is actually with our news station right here in Denver.
Mm-hmm.
So, and they are a very conservative group. I can tell you, they don't go for what would be considered to be, kind of more the fringe type. So it's happening.
Mm-hmm.
And how much was Wichita?
Their number of degrees off.
Yes.
I believe they were 3.
3 degrees. And there you go.
Yep.
All right. So here is another one, the National Business Aviation Association.
Right. And this is the one where they talk about the rate of the movement of magnetic north. You'll see that that article has a date on it of March 14th, 2011. So what they say is that the rate of speed at the time that article was written was about 40 miles an hour, or 40 miles an hour, 40 miles a year for magnetic north, as far as how far it's moving in a year's time. And it was looking at, you'll see in the 1, 2, 3rd paragraph down there, the last sentence will tell you that at the moment it's sliding across the Arctic Ocean near Canada towards Siberia at a rate of nearly 40 miles per year. And according to the USGS, that speed has increased by 36% from 2001 to 2011.
This is one of the articles that really, it sets you back, because if you begin to simply extrapolate the simple math of what we're now seeing, it's like, I vision this as a top. When we were kids, we actually had, the actual tops that you would spin them.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what I'm seeing. The deviation of the wobble has become so great because of the weakening magnetosphere. And now we're seeing the indications of the sun, as Dr. Claudia Albers stated, and now it's everywhere. Everywhere I look, Brenda, I'm seeing articles saying the sun is dimming.
Yes.
Get ready, folks. It's going to get even dimmer. Now, she has been saying that from the very beginning, which, what's going on here? How dim is dim going to be?
Right.
And are we seeing a correlation of basically cause and effect here?
Absolutely.
What would you say from what you've actually been researching?
Well, I think so. And it's interesting because, of course, the articles that I found in my search on this topic don't really go into the things that Claudia Albers is talking about. But I think that, at least based on other things that I've been able to see by way of YouTube videos, by way of listening to her thesis, it just seems like there's another component as far as what's affecting this planet geomagnetically. We have we have a whole host of different things going on. But I think that the most significant one you'll pull up as we go through here, and that's the state of the magnetosphere.
All right.
And that is key to what we can expect to have happening and looking at the trends here.
So this is even one that just came out yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
Scientists warn of unusual cold sun, we will face another ice age. The question I've been asking myself is, and I'm starting to do it. I've been taking care of my wife, who's been very ill. Is that so? Are we in fact at that point now where we're going to begin to see deviation in weather patterns that become so much more greater in their deviations from what we've seen for centuries, if not millennia? And are these, again, all merely the cause and effect of what we're seeing with our sun? And now with what has been, this is what I don't think most people don't realize. This has been a slow moving train wreck for hundreds of years.
Yes.
So I have a question just on our discussion here, Brent. Where do you think we are in that process? Have we left the rails? In other words, have we left the track?
Well, I think, I think that the fact that we're seeing an increase in the rate at which magnetic north is traveling, it's going to be interesting to see if that speed accelerates beyond 40 miles per year.
Mm-hmm.
And when you pull up the NOAA imagery, and when you show that one graphic, that is going to show you, let me get the term right here. Will be, yeah, see, when you take a look at that one, look at the rate of change between 1980 and the year 2000.
Right in here, yeah.
Look at the amount of movement on that.
Yeah.
It's remarkable.
And then subsequently, as you look at the next, and they're doing these in 5-year increments, look what's happening here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right now you've got that magnetic North Pole that is out in the middle of the ocean moving towards Siberia. And you've got there's the South Pole, magnetic south, which you can see is off the continent already. It's not as dramatic as the north, but it is moving. And those are the coordinates over the same period of time there.
You can actually we can actually see this, correct? You can actually see where we are up here. Well,
So
the deviation, go ahead.
Yeah, you can look at both. You can look at the dip poles there, which represent magnetic north, and then you can look at the geomagnetic, which is in the blue on these diagrams.
Right here.
Correct.
So there is one of the things I think we're seeing is two theories of thought, that we're seeing the magnetic South Pole moving closer and closer. And let me get back over here. I want to pull this up. So give me 1 second. I want to, let's see. Here we go. So this is what I think is what we're seeing as well, is that the drift is now moving somewhere into this general vicinity. What do you think? Brenda, did we lose you?
Well, you did for a minute. I don't know if you can see me, but I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. We just can't see you.
Okay. Well, I am here. I'm not sure what's happening.
Okay. All right. Well, that's fine.
I got a little notation here that my internet connection was unstable, and
that was what would happen. Now you can easily log off and then log back in if you'd like.
No, it did it by itself. It's done it by itself. I mean, I suppose we could try that, but it's a safer bet just to leave it as it is.
That's not a problem. Can you still see the screen?
I can, yes.
Okay. So I think that this is kind of giving everyone of what we're seeing is the deviation. It's coming off of this region. Let me get into this area if I can get it stabilized into this general area of here. Now, this is important because you were just bringing up this fact And let me get back to where we were. Here we go. So here is a graph that is showing us, this is NOAA.
Right.
All right, so I'll let you pick up the commentary from here.
Yeah, if you, Wayne, on the right-hand side there where those tabs are,
Yep.
Click on Arctic
Here we
and
go.
you can get a look at there's a slider down there where you can select your year. And it's real interesting to watch what happens with those green lines are representing lines on the globe where there are 0 degrees of differentiation between magnetic north and true north. That's what those green lines are. But as you move that slider forward, it's just real interesting to see what happens to the configuration of those lines.
Look at that.
And are you on the Arctic one, Wayne?
I am. This is the Arctic.
Okay.
And this would be, yeah. So as we move the
so click
slider.
that slider to the right. There you go.
I don't know why it doesn't want to play, but here we go.
So you've got these 2 green lines approaching, and then as you get to 2020, there you go. They completely shift their orientation.
Let's see what we have on the. Look at the Arctic. This is Antarctica.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go to 1700s. Look at that. Wow. Look at that. Wow, that's sobering. Now, this is the one I found interesting, is what we're seeing with the anomalies happening around the equator now.
Mm-hmm.
Most people don't realize, Brenda, is that the equator also has a magnetic center, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, we're seeing the strange anomalies out there with, for instance, you know, large portions of waters, estuaries, emptying out into the Atlantic Ocean. We're seeing other areas that are having inundation of what would appear to be tidal waves coming up out of nowhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a very important point, and it's significant for people to understand. If you're not familiar with what's called the South Atlantic anomaly,
That's it.
It's and there's a particular link I sent you, Wayne, that has a graphic from Wikipedia that will show exactly where that anomaly is, so that people can get a visual of it. But that is an area right now where the magnetic field has a pronounced weakness.
Yes.
It is an area where it wreaks havoc with satellites. It wreaks havoc with airplanes. Anything that has, you know, geomagnetic navigational systems. Hubble does not do observations over that area. It shuts down.
There you go.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. This is an article from the Daily Mail.
Right. So the Daily Mail article was interesting because it came out in January of 2014. And of course, the Daily Mail's out of the UK. So the European Space Agency launched what they call the swarm satellites.
Mm-hmm.
And that was in November of 2013. So this article came out just shortly after swarm launched. And I think that probably they were getting some very early indications from the swarm data, because I think it's been among the most significant collectors of information on the state of our magnetosphere and our magnetic field state. You can see there that they mentioned that the previous indications of weakening for our magnetic field were at a rate of 5% per century, but once swarm got up there, that has modified to 5% per decade. And there's another article later on that I think has that as a headline. So our magnetosphere and our magnetic field, it's weakening 10 times the rate previously estimated and or observed. It's unclear to me whether that original number of 5% weakening per century was merely a guess or whether it was based on some hard data.
Well, we'll make anyone who wants these links, we'll certainly make them available as well. So this one here is Life Science, and this is the one, as you said, 2014, 10 times faster now.
Right. And this one, you'll notice the date on this is July 8th of 2014. So this is coming out about 8 to 9 months after Swarm got up there and began collecting data.
Look at this. Now, this is the alarming thing, is that we're finding now that even what we thought was the most exaggerated estimates are finding out that actually are very conservative.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Okay. So we've seen a significant weakening in the magnetic field, and that is pivotal because it's probably the strongest indicator of the probability of these polarities getting ready to reverse.
Yes, yes. Now this is an article from what is it? It's Science.
Yeah, this one, the one that you've got up right now is, give me just a sec. Yep. That one kind of caught my eye simply because it talks quite a bit about that South Atlantic anomaly. And a little light on where that's located. So it talks about the magnetic field being collapsed, with that collapse centered on a huge expanse of the southern hemisphere extending from Zimbabwe to Chile.
Yep.
And again, they mentioned that it's a hazard for any kind of aircraft or satellites or other kinds of spacecraft that are operating in that area.
The field no longer protects them from the radiation. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right.
And what was also interesting to note in this article is it discusses the fact that there is a patch of reversed polarity beneath southern Africa at the Coromantel boundary.
Now, just a side note to that, Brenda. If you go and you look at the seismic records, you will find that we're seeing an anomaly in that portion of Africa that we shouldn't be seeing the anomalies we are seeing, which is leading to speculation that may be where the eventual, what will be north, but would be south pole is heading.
Yeah, agreed. And
does that make sense?
Yep, it does, because basically what can happen is when you've got a large swath of area that is affected, as I am understanding it, when it's affected that strongly in terms of magnetic weakness, if that region expands, it can essentially overtake the hemisphere, and that's when you get the reversal in polarity.
By the way, it's also important to, before we came on, I was going through my notes of the past. I've done a number of programs on this, but here's the other interesting thing that we have found in times where we were in a more heated environment, that the Earth was spinning faster.
Yes.
We're seeing now, because of these magnetic anomalies becoming more and more common, that the Earth is also, we know, is slowing down.
Correct.
Cause and effect? I don't know. So,
yeah, and here they're just discussing the fact that they were able to look at some ancient grain storage bins that are made of clay. And it's the same concept as being able to make some observations about magnetic fields in the past based on pottery, because when the minerals in the clay are, when they're dried, these things were burned, but when it cools, you've got minerals in there that give directional indicators as to magnetic field inclination, its direction, as well as strength.
There you go, right there. So we know that we have seen anomalies, and here's a good graph of that.
Mhm.
So, again, everything on the planet has to balance out. And so if this is where we see our magnetic poles heading in a reversal, the question, I guess, then, is there a cause and effect to where we could actually see a geographical flip? Now, that would actually require the planet to physically
Right.
flip. I don't see that happening.
I haven't read anything that really suggests that is on the horizon. It's just it is the magnetic reversal that is looking like a very strong possibility. Depending on whose article you read, of course, you're going to see people saying, "Oh, likely to be in hundreds of years. It's likely to be in thousands of years." But you've got a lot of strong evidence that with the acceleration of magnetic North's movement, the accelerated weakening of the magnetic field, and the Maunder minimum effect of the sun,
Yes.
it's going to be a much shorter time frame than that. That we're probably looking possibly at decades versus hundreds or thousands of years. This particular diagram is again off Wikipedia, and it just shows you where that South Atlantic anomaly is located, so that you can get a visual idea. And again, as we were talking before we came on, Wayne, what caught my eye about this is we've had so much by way of water anomalies, and with some of the ocean coastlines receding, some of the first areas that saw that phenomenon, where it occurred initially, to the best of my knowledge, was right there on the Atlantic side of South America. You saw Ecuador, you saw Uruguay, I think, had an episode with that early on, and it has since, been noted in other locations, and has moved into the the northern hemisphere as well, because I think San Diego and Florida, there's some visual evidence of water retreating from the coastlines.
Yes, I have we have one of our community members down there. I just haven't, we've talked about where you just can't hook up with an individual, but he's lived in Florida and he has been video recording this, and I've got to get him on.
Well, and
Yeah.
there is a website out there, and some in the chat room I know are familiar with this particular YouTube channel, but Mr. MBB333, if you want to take a look at some video and photographic evidence of what we're talking about with this water retreat, he's got some really good stuff.
Yeah,
That will
I
give you an
agree.
idea as to what we're talking about. And the other noteworthy thing to me is that right now you've mentioned Cape Town, South Africa, being ready to be without any water whatsoever for that municipality. And you'll notice that Cape Town, where they're located, is right there on the tip of South Africa, which is also in that South Atlantic anomaly region.
I'm trying to find the one graph that we had. This may be, let me go to the Antarctic side. So we can see that, I was trying to pull that graph up that we had, but
is it the animated one, Wayne?
yeah, let's see. There we go.
Yeah,
Not this.
Yeah, that's going to be one that on the links that I sent you, it's going to say Colorado EDU.
Yeah. Let's see. We may come up on it here yet. You see, now this is the kind of thing that, this is where I see more of an agenda that's being propagated here than science fact.
Mhm.
You got you got those who are trying to use this event by claiming that this is leading or the cause of climate change. The problem is how they phrase that. Climate change is always a present on Earth. The question I'm asking, and what I think we have to get into, is, well, yes, okay, so climate change is going to happen, and they're talking about the wobble right here. Now, and you look at the jet stream, which basically controls air currents, which also then can control the moisture currents. These are now the deviations we're seeing as a result of this wobble. Is that what you have found as well?
I think that's true. There are a number of different articles I found. And I kind of deliberately left out some of the white paper stuff that I looked at,
Mm-hmm.
only because I didn't want people's eyes to completely glaze over. But they,
Never happened.
but they basically are looking at, and again, I think these things are all interconnected, and as I mentioned to you in an email, it's kind of a chicken or egg question. Which came first, the melting of the glaciers up in the Arctic, or the magnetic field changes and the migration of magnetic north? I think they go hand in glove. It's really hard to determine a cause and effect. From my standpoint as a layperson anyway, it may be much clearer to experts in this field, but there clearly is a dual influence. And from my own perspective, it kind of seems like we've got magnetic and electrical current situations that are changing and heating up certain areas of the Arctic and Antarctic. So we see an acceleration in melt of those glaciers. And then, as Claudia talked about, you have a whole host of other problems or issues that come up when you've got that freshwater melting into the oceans.
Yeah, the Beaufort, but
Right.
this is very interesting. I don't know how many people fully are grasping, because as I was looking at this, so what we're seeing is this massive area of what they're calling hot dense mantle being generated now, right as you can see with Africa, and extending down here into the Indian Ocean. This is the area that they're running out of water. The whole thing is changing. And I didn't realize, Brenda, when I looked at this afternoon, how dense the field has become.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's clearly something taking place.
Absolutely.
Let's see. I think we have. So here's the discussion in this one, which is interesting again. So when we look at recent geological history and we look at what happened, particularly in the northern climates, speaking of Siberia, where we saw the evidence of flash frozen animals on the tundra.
Mm-hmm.
These were the woolly mammoths. There were others, that there was a dramatic, sudden climate shift. Now, the question I have is that this deviation that we're seeing in our magnetic fields right now, were those precursors to those events? Could they actually duplicate themselves again in present day?
And I think it's a good question. In this article that you have pulled up right here, I know they're looking specifically at something that you mentioned earlier, in this program, which is the effects of rotational speed.
Yes.
And they're
Right.
tying it in to, of course, changes related to climate that produce changes in rotation and a variety of other things. But this was quite interesting because they used a supercomputer, and it said it took 100 hours to run on a supercomputer over a period of 2 months. And of course, they greatly exaggerated, for purposes of being able to collect the data, what the impact of a slower rotational rate is. But essentially, they found that magnetic field strength oscillated with roughly the same shape and rotation as the rotation rate variation. And so it was a sine wave pattern, but with a much larger amplitude of 25%.
25%.
Mm-hmm.
So what I hear, and when I hear that, is that, I'm visualizing now this big old globe. By the way, I heard the funniest quote yesterday from the Flat Earth Society. The quote was from their head guy was saying, "We have observers all over the globe."
Well,
okay.
there we go.
All right, I digress.
It makes perfect sense, right?
Yeah, a flat Earth, and they got observers all over the globe. Okay, I don't know.
But in any case,
Anyway, so what we have here is this massive matter called planet Earth. And when we begin to talk about a slower rotation, and here, as they said, even a slightly faster rotation rate for the Earth could have increased its magnetic field. So I start deducing from that, going, okay, so if we have a faster rotating planet, does that then induce a stronger magnetic field? And that would then say, if we're seeing the reverse of that, and now the evidence is coming in that our planet is slowing, is there something yet outside of our influence, Brenda, that's causing this?
Well, and that's kind of where I think Dr. Albers' research comes in. And I think there's a perturbance that probably isn't even taken into consideration in the articles that I was able to find in researching this topic. Um, that particular article you had up last, I like the way they describe it, because they say there's a sentence in there that says the increased polar mass lowers the planet's rotational inertia. So like a spinning ice skater pulling her arms inward, causes the Earth to spin faster. And that generates a stronger field from the electrons in the core. So yeah, conversely, when you've got all this melt going on and you have the mass leaving its dense state in ice form from those poles, the reverse is going to occur. So again, I think to be able to definitively point to cause and effect and say which causes the melting, which causes the weakening of the field, what came first, it's just all goes hand in glove. And certainly the state of our sun is a huge player in the equation.
Yeah, yeah. Now, and this is one of the topics where we'll get Claudia to get back on Dr. Albers, because the evidence is now, and what Brenda, what I want to appreciate the research that you have done, and when you just compile this, because the way that I like how you did this, you came from basically there was no agenda here. It was just basically, let me see what's out there. Let's start collecting it, and let's see what it's saying.
Right.
And what it's saying is, well, quite disturbing. I mean, obviously, we know that the shield of our planet is weakening. It has been, it's been increasing.
Right.
We see that the magnetic poles are traversing at a greater rate. We see our sun that is getting weaker and weaker. So, what are we seeing here? Is this something that is yet outside of even the influence of what we have here? Thank you, Scott. Scott, Scott is here. Sion, thank you, my friend. By the way, we got to get you and Dr. Albers back on.
No, I would agree with that. And I do. I think that there is, there's a whole lot of folks with different ideas and different theories, ranging from Planet X to Black Star to the brown dwarfs. But I think Dr. Albers has got solid research. She's got the credentials. She's got the expertise to understand and explain it very well, which I thought she did.
Oh, yeah. These galactic cores, the stellar core. Stellar
Yes,
cores.
that's right. The stellar cores.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so when you've got that, it's just what I think is important for people to be aware of. This is not a show we're doing to try to panic people or cause them to go into, 5-alarm fire mode here. But I think it's just good to be aware of this information. It's good to be keeping an eye on what is happening and where is our magnetic north going. Is it increasing in its rate of travel? What's our magnetic field doing? Is it continuing to weaken? Is it accelerating in the rate of weakening? Because we've seen acceleration over the past couple decades.
Yes, we have.
And if it continues to accelerate, then it's going to be here. The magnetic pole reversal will be here sooner as opposed to later. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have a clean flip where what once was pointing magnetic north now reads south, because as the one article here mentioned, you can have basically a state of chaos for a period of time where there's more than one north or more than one south.
Oh, now that is a good point. Scott, make sure that you talk to Dr. Albers on that. Brenda, that's brilliant, because when we see the dipole situation set up on our planet, and then as it's going through this process, again, I use the top as an example here. So as it's going to lose its bearing in this point. So I like how you said that. So we could actually get two magnetic norths or magnetic souths.
Correct.
And any idea in what you've done in that research? Because I'm showing Corona up here just to show people that in our brief little conversation tonight, we can actually see how much, it's even deviating as we talk. Mm-hmm. So that's interesting. Well, I wonder if when we see that, is that not then is that another trigger for another alarm? That's a very interesting point. I had not thought about that, Brenda. Excellent.
Yeah, I can't take credit for it. It's in a number of the research articles that I read, but it seems pretty clear that it could be a rather, chaotic sequence of events where it's not as if it just makes a clean flip necessarily.
Yeah.
And so I do, and I think it's important for people to know, what does it mean when you talk about a weaker magnetic field? What does it mean if you talk about a potential magnetic pole reversal? And the key things that people need to be aware of and prepared for is simply that as the magnetic field weakens, you have more cosmic rays that are going to be able to get through. So you have to be mindful of that. And I don't think it's any coincidence that this past summer, again, if you were watching MBB 333, they did UV readings regularly throughout the summer. And some of those readings were just unbelievable. 12, 13, not at all uncommon. And in areas of the country where you just wouldn't expect it to be that high. So,
this is, unfortunately, we can't get. Well, I think they've got some new satellites up there getting the daily cosmic ray reports. It's one of the reasons why I don't fly as much anymore. It's, people don't realize this, but when you go up for that little trip, guess what, folks? I mean, the dose of radiation that you're taking on is just ridiculous now.
Correct.
Yeah.
So I think people need to be aware of that. It also, as we continue to see assuming these phenomenon continue on pace, then the other things that can happen is, again, any kind of electromagnetic equipment, just like going over that anomaly area, you have aircraft and you have satellites adversely affected.
Yes.
Yeah, we're going to see our entire, electronic infrastructure far more vulnerable to any kind of, cosmic ray interface and interaction, because we don't have the protection that we used to have as this field weakens. So there are implications, when we're in the throes of this, where power grids can go down. And I think people just need to think about what plan do you have in place for a reasonably long length emergency? What provisions do you have for food, for water, for heat, if you don't have the electronic grid functioning?
Yeah, I think as well as that when we begin to think about these type of effects, I think it's accumulative. I really do. I don't, much like earthquakes, we know that when pressure builds up on these fault lines, that, that's when it snaps. I think as well as with the weather. I mean, as you were talking, I was thinking about this article that came out today that they've now done a study, and they realized that there's some, 800 million viruses that they found out that actually goes up from the ground up into the upper stratosphere, then is basically raining down on us. And I'm wondering, As we continue to see these higher doses of cosmic radiation hitting us, now we're realizing, for instance, because of the weakening magnetic shield, which is the magnetopause, that we're seeing this having an effect, for instance, with cardiac patients. We're
Yes.
seeing this with cancer patients. We're seeing this with patients that have certain psychotic episodes, that this is directly related to cosmic rays.
Correct. And again, I don't think that should really surprise us because the human body is an electromagnetic system as well.
Correct. Now, see, I'm glad you brought that up. So we know that you and I, everyone in the chat room here, basically generates 20 watts of electricity. And if we're seeing interruption by where Dr. Albers would say, which is basically much more these particles, heavy elements coming in at us at ever increasing amounts with ever increasing frequency, there has to be a correlation, Brenda, I think, as well as cellular damage.
Oh, I think that's a fair statement. Absolutely.
And if it's happening to us as Homo sapiens, bipedals, then it tells me it's happening to the plants as well.
Correct. And I think Dr. Albers did address that and said, you know, if we see sufficient weakening of the magnetic field and the magnetopause, we're going to, it has the propensity or the potential to sterilize.
There's Claudia's in here. Cosmic rays are not particles, they're not radiation. They are things like neutrons and muons. All right, there you are. So
I know she talked about.
We should have brought her on here, but I didn't think about that.
That would have been awesome. But I know she talked about the prospects of sterilizing the planet if you have enough. If I remember what she said correctly, if you have enough, you know, of the radiation getting through, that it can, and she can maybe confirm if I remember that right or not. But it does, I think, render all living things vulnerable.
You know what? I think, let me see if I could actually, you need to get her on. This would be a great time to actually brought that discussion, because now we're bringing up, I think, more of what I see as a more direct, immediate effect. Now, weather obviously affects us all. We know that. But when you begin to think about our necessity of having to intake energy, which is basically consuming plant life and animals, that when we begin to see that the cellular breakdown of what we eat is being intaked on that has to have a cause and effect.
Mm-hmm. I do. I think it's all interconnected. And I even, and I'm sure Dr. Albers could speak to this at an expert level, whereas I'm only speculating, but
well, let me just put the invite out there. I tell you what I'd love to have would be to get Dr. Albers on here, get Rex Bear on here, get Scott, get even Dr. Miller on here, get you on here, and maybe we would have this roundtable discussion on this subject alone, right here alone, sticking with the subject material that we have, the magnetic pole reversal. It's happening. We know it is. Now let's bring in the people that are really smart. You know, they're the ones that got the parchment degrees. And let's bring into, I think what I like to do is have a layman and our academics come in and let's have a discussion. How about that, folks, in the chat room? Would that sound like a pretty good deal? Okay, great. Then are you reading this as well, Brenda?
I cannot see the comments. So
oh, you cannot. Okay. Well,
are we getting mostly favorable?
Oh yeah, there's 305 people in here. All right. So yeah, this is a topic that we need to discuss more, because listen, as we're talking, I'm already getting this download in my head. So think about this, folks. So if we have this higher doses of radiation coming in, and we know that radiation does cause cellular damage, we're eating this stuff, and it's bad enough that on top of that, they've altered it through genetic modification. But now I wonder, Brenda, what is it that we're eating? If this is global and this is happening, and particularly when I look at South America, do you know what I think about immediately, Brenda, is that there's more and more agriculture coming from that part of the planet.
Correct.
And so now I'm sorry, folks, I'm just now connecting this. And, I'm like at the dunce hat going, duh, so now we're seeing a region of the globe that, because of the weather patterns, because of the raw resources, is becoming more and more of the food basket for the world. Now we're seeing those particular areas getting hammered with radiation.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know. I'm just trying to connect the dots here. I mean, I don't think that would be good for us.
Yeah, well, I would not think that it would be desirable, because obviously that magnetic shield is providing protection for the the entirety of the planet, like you said, animal,
Yeah.
all of it. And so, I think one of the things that has crossed my mind, and one of the things I've wondered about as well, and this would be probably a Dr. Albers question, is when we're looking at some of these ocean retreats from the coastline, um, is there an electromagnetic explanation for that? I mean, we know that water, if it is got mineral content, it's going to conduct electricity.
Yeah.
And is some of what we're seeing directly interrelated to the changes in the magnetic field? The other interesting piece of this is that in some of the research I did, there's been research done which shows that the ocean currents themselves generate their own mini electromagnetic field. So that's interfacing with the greater magnetic field of the planet. So it's just a like layer upon layer of interconnected pieces and parts. And I personally can't help but think that some of the seismic activity we're seeing, the volcanic activity we're seeing, as well as the climate chaos we're seeing, it all interconnects back at an electromagnetic level.
Give me 1 second. I'm going to try to get Claudia on here. So give me 1 second. Can you stay on a little bit longer?
Absolutely.
Okay. So I'm trying to get an invite here. So let me see. Here we go. So I just sent her an invite. So let's see if she gets that. And maybe she can actually come on. I think this would be a great discussion, because I guess the thing that, as I'm beginning to think, as we talk about, again, this weakening of the shield, that it begins to impact every aspect of the entire food chain.
Mm-hmm.
And it's quite alarming when, Dr. Albers, I just sent you a invite. If you want to come on, be love to have you. This becomes alarming because, I mean, I'm not a doctor, PhD, but you know what? If I'm consuming altered mass that's either been affected by radiation, and radiation is accumulative, I believe, and I'm consuming that, then how well does that work with my cellular structure?
Well, I think the question too, Wayne, when you're talking about radiation affecting the quality of food crops that are grown, my question is, how much nutritive value do you think it has if it's been radiated?
Yeah, yeah. You're basically eating cake. Zero. Yeah, I mean, it has virtually no,
Yeah.
the nutrition. I mean, and that's been one of the problems I've known for some time, is that much of the food intake that we've been taking has been lacking a lot of the essential minerals, those
Mhm.
type of elements that we are depriving our bodies of. And now when you think about a magnetic pole shift, a weakening of the magnetopause itself, I mean, this this gets a little freaky, and we're not even talking about the weather aspect of it. No one's even brought that aspect of it
Yeah.
up.
I think it
But
does. It just has far-reaching implications on a whole host of levels. I think that it is just something that impacts every facet of our day-to-day life.
it does. It does. And I keep on thinking, Brenda, future generations, it doesn't take. All right, I did a Tuesday before this illness hit our home. I did a story that they now estimate, if things continue the way it is, Homo sapiens could be sterile in 100 years.
Mm-hmm.
Are we talking about potentially? Think about this now. I hadn't connected the dots, folks. This is what I love about the shows that we do here. So, Brenda, let's connect the dots. So now we're seeing, again, the title of the show is The Evidence of a Magnetic Pole Reversal. Now we're getting back to this thing on a genetic basis that is probably most likely sterilizing us to a greater degree.
Well, I think you have again, I don't think there's one simple cause. It certainly can't be doing any good. I would have to probably take a look at what research is. I'm sure the research is out there. I do know that one of the things right now, and we were in the chat room when I was talking to some folks on one of your shows recently, we were having some discussion about the amount of plastics that is in our environment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the estrogen mimicking properties of the plastics. So I said, is it any wonder sperm count in males is down when we have plastics touching every facet of our day-to-day life? So you've got, I think, a whole host of things, both in the chemical realm and in the electromagnetic realm. It's, yeah.
So as you were talking, wow, this is just hitting me. So we see a chemical reaction within the plastics that we now have virtually all of our fluids in that carry it. We're talking about here of an increased amount of cosmic radiation permeating the earth. Now, if I go back to my days of simple science, if you're radiating something, there's always going to be a breakdown on a molecule level, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm beginning to think so. We already know plastics are not the best thing that we should be drinking out of.
Correct. And they don't do well in microwaves.
No, they don't.
So if we're seeing a higher degree of radiation through it may be having an impact on, how non-BPA plastic, plastic containing BPAs, how much it leaches or to what degrees. So yeah, it's, again, I think that it's like tugging on the, a string in a spider's web. The whole thing just somehow comes back to everything else.
Well, the show, we were dealing in scientific fact, and so we know that it's happening. Now, I think the question has to begin then, let's talk about the other realities. I mean, if you go outside into a rainstorm, if you don't have an umbrella, chances are you're going to get wet. Now, if you get wet, let's say you start getting hypothermia. Let's say you get hypothermia, you develop pneumonia, and then you're dead.
Correct.
I mean, it's not so far-fetched, is it?
Well, it makes perfect sense to me, Wayne.
I'm looking at everyone in the chat room going, all right, am I getting off the path here? I mean, I don't think so. I think it's, and I'm sitting here kind of basically, going, what the heck? I mean, folks, now I think about the chemtrailing. All right. Now, I have never heard about this on the chemtrailing. I did send her on the link. I thought that it came, that we sent it to her. But if it didn't, let's send it again. She's ready. So give me 1 second here, Brenda.
Awesome.
And I will copy this. Here we go. I'm surprised it didn't. All right, let's send this again. So, I hadn't connected the dots in all this. And
I think you're bringing it down to a level where people are understanding that it's not just sort of an interesting intellectual exercise to do the research on this. It has real world implications, and it has
huge implications.
Yeah, for each of us again in the day to day.
I mean, I look at this and I'm just, I don't know. I'm kind of going, I hadn't thought about this. And let's go back to the chemtrailing. What if the chemtrailing is really there to somehow begin to add a protective layer from all these cosmic particles coming in? I don't know.
Well, and I've certainly considered that, because in some of these articles that I dove into, there is indication that, and I don't want to get this wrong, so let me see if I can find the article I have in mind, because it specifically talks about low cloud cover being correlated with some of this.
Oh, now that is all right,
So,
folks.
hang
So,
on, let me see if I can find it.
all right. So while she's doing that, so you can go and see the video I have on the archives. Why are clouds lowering? It's gotten, well, you can go see the views yourself. That is interesting because, Trisha G, when she was on here, her military training was, meteorology, studying clouds. We're getting new classifications of clouds. We know clouds are lowering. I keep on seeing this entire cause and effect. Wow.
Absolutely.
It's just amazing. So is the chemtrailing? Let's just take it this other way around. What if it's actually they're trying to insulate us? I mean, I don't know.
I think it's possible.
Linda W goes, "Oh no, Wayne, please don't believe that."
I mean, I think it's possible that that's
It was just a theory. Go ahead, Brenda.
yeah, it's possible that that's part of the agenda. It doesn't mean that it's a good plan, or that they've thought through exactly
Yeah.
what components should be in this particular blanket they're trying to throw over the planet. You know, thinking.
Hey, listen, if they're in the kitchen making the recipe, it can't be good.
Well, I would concur. I mean, I look at some of the stuff the FDA approves, and I'm thinking, well, your arthritis
I
is.
mean, they're not there for our benefit. Going, yeah, guys, here you go. We're really going to help prolong your life.
Yeah, exactly. So maybe they're figuring, well, if they all die of cancer or viruses, it's at least there'll maybe be a few who have the fortitude to fight it off, and there we go. I have no idea what the thought process is. But it was notable that there was some comments made trying to find that language.
Yeah. Well, I mean, at some point in time, we're going to get this. I don't know why the invites are not going out, but Brenda, if I can get a hold of Rex and everyone else, could you come back on? I mean, what I'd love to, I know it can sometimes with your work schedule, but I'd love to get you on and maybe even see if we can get something here in the next couple of days. This is a good discussion. It needs to be expounded upon. I'll just put it that way. Obviously, the chat room thinks as well. I mean, because now I'm concerned.
Yeah, I would welcome it, and Claudia may well be able. Obviously, she can bring an expert perspective to this that I don't have. I have an education, but it's certainly not in the hard sciences. So I'm a layperson like everybody else looking into this, and I think what she has to offer to this discussion would just be great.
Yeah, I think so too. So give me 1 second here. I'm going to go. And what I'm going to do is up here. Give me 1 second. Let's see if I can get, let me forward this. Dr. Albers, I'm going to see if I can now forward this to you on this one. Let's see if she can get the link now. Apparently it didn't want to go through on the other email servers. So there we go. Let's see if she comes on here, Brenda. And if she can, then I may go on a little bit longer. And I always feel bad when I have our guests because I know your time is valuable. But
it's all right. I found some of the language here on that cloud cover, and it's from the Daily Mail article that you had pulled up before from January of 2014.
okay.
But there is language in this particular article where it discusses the fact that, and again, 2014 article, a recent Danish study believes global warming is directly related to the magnetic field rather than CO2 emissions. The study claimed that the planet is experiencing a natural period of low cloud cover due to fewer cosmic rays entering the atmosphere.
Fewer.
Fewer. So I thought that was interesting.
These guys are always playing mind
So I'm
quiz.
like, fewer, more, and maybe there's a difference that Claudia can point out again between, she pointed out the difference between the cosmic rays and some of the particulates and
Yeah.
whatnot. So, but
Well,
that there are a couple of them that mention that low cloud cover as a feature of some of the weather anomalies that are associated with our weakening field.
how interesting. This is amazing. You know, as I'm seeing this now, I think that for the longest time, whether we've seen it through the sun, we've seen it through anomalies within our solar system, now in our planet, that there is a thread that's connecting all of this. And maybe it's just, okay, here she is. So Claudia is here. So let me invite her in. Here we go. And Dr. Albers, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you, Wayne.
Well, thank you for coming on in such short notice.
Yeah.
Well, so you've heard our discussion, and so give us your take on, number one, correct us where we hadn't the right science, but then give us your take on the topic itself.
Well, obviously you're talking about cosmic rays, and I have not so long ago actually written an article about this exactly, that the amount of cosmic rays we are getting impacted with is off the scale at the moment. And I believe it increased by 13% from, I think, May of 2015, something like that. And that's a huge increase.
That's huge.
And cosmic rays, our magnetosphere does nothing to stop them. So the fact that our magnetosphere is weaker, it has no impact on that. They go right through because they're very fast moving particles. And what they do is they cause particle showers in our atmosphere. So you get secondary particles, and some of them will come right to the surface. And the most dangerous ones are neutrons and muons. And these, of course, will destroy cells. They will cause cancer. They are very, very damaging. And of course, the worst part, the worst affected area will be close to the pole. So the further north you are, the more affected you will be. And the other thing they do is they destroy the ozone layer as well. We already have the chemtrails. We already have more volcanoes erupting than usual. All of this is destroying the ozone layer. The cosmic rays do it as well. So we are going to get more high energy UV radiation. And as Brenda was saying, I had said before as well, that this it can destroy all life on Earth. And so it's just another one of those things that are coming together to basically destroy life on Earth. This is not the only thing. We have Fukushima. We have the chaotic weather that all seems, well, Fukushima not necessarily related, but the weather is related to what's happening with the sun, what's happening in the solar system. Yeah, so this is definitely what is happening to our planet. And it is something that we should definitely talk about. It's very, very dangerous.
Are we talking about a species altering event happening here? I mean, when I think about this, Dr. Albers, I think by the fact that when you talk about these neutrons hitting us, right? The cellular damage when they hit, if I'm correctly on this, when they pass through us, there is cellular damage taking place, right?
That's right. What they do is they are too energetic. So when they go into a cell, they do one or two things. Either they destroy the cell or they damage the DNA in the cell. if the DNA is damaged, it means that when the cell splits into two cells, it doesn't perform its job anymore. And that's what can lead to cancer. And then it can directly destroy the cell. And if we have too much cellular damage, more than the body can deal with, then it can cause an organ failure, and that can lead to death. It will be quicker than the cancer in that case.
Would we also see this an indication of cancer, particularly when I think about infants, and I'm thinking in more childhood cancers? Because it seems, I just read a report, in fact, it was today, that the alarming rate of childhood cancers is escalating on a global scale. And of course, I'm sure the big pharma companies see this as a bonanza because, so I keep on thinking cause and effect, right?
That's right. Cancer is always produced in our bodies all the time because cells, often things go wrong. What stops cancer from taking off is our immune system. So if our immune system starts failing, then cancerous cells will proliferate, but it can take years for those cancer cells to, unless the damage is so widespread that you get cancer growing all over the place. But usually a tumor takes many years to grow. So the fact that children are getting it is very strange in a way. It means that the cancer started growing from just about the time they were born, and the immune system did nothing about it.
Wow.
And you see, cancer is all about inflammation and the fact that our bodies are too acidic, because if it becomes alkaline, then the cancer cells cannot survive. So all of that comes into cancer. And I think oxygen seems to come into it, and our body produces more oxygen if it's more alkaline. And most likely the oxygen on Earth is declining in our atmosphere. The more pollution we have, then the less oxygen we are going to have in our atmosphere, and that may impact the incidence of cancer too.
I'm sitting here and I mean, the chat room is just absolutely filling up, but I'm sitting here kind of almost in awe, Dr. Albers. And Brenda, I know that you're still here.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Brenda.
My question to Dr. Albers too is that I think you mentioned that cancer cells do not survive in an alkaline, high oxygen environment. And I've also read that cancer cells are very low voltage. That they are very low voltage cells.
The moment you have oxygen, you have more electrons. And that's one of the things that you need. You need more electrons. And maybe that's what you mean by the voltage. Yeah.
Right.
Oh, wow. I'm seeing this. This is amazing. I mean, this really is amazing.
Yeah.
So through these effects that we're seeing now in our population, Dr. Albers, do you see these effects as only increasing? Heavier doses of cosmic radiation, the sun continuing to dim, continued weakening of our magnetospause. Where do you see this going?
Well, our sun is definitely weakening, and it's weakening independently of the solar cycle. So no matter whether we are solar maximum or solar minimum, the sun is declining. It's getting darker, I believe.
Yeah.
It's getting much weaker. And so we are going to get more cosmic rays coming from outside our solar system because the sun is weaker. And I believe we're also getting high energy particles from the sun itself. Whenever it has these solar flare events, there are always particles that are very high energy particles that would be termed cosmic radiation, except if they come from the sun, they're called solar energetic particles. But they still will do the same thing in our atmosphere. They will cause secondary particles or air showers. It will still increase our radiation. And then, as you know, I believe that we have extra objects in our solar system, and these objects are also producing radiation. And they also impacting our magnetosphere. They also ionizing our ionosphere. They're also causing damage in many, many ways. And they are involved in our planet's poles shifting as well, because they have magnetic fields. It's not just our sun that has a magnetic field. These are stars with magnetic fields. So they will affect our solar system in many ways, and they will affect the Earth, and they will cause our poles to shift as well.
Boy, as you were just talking, you and I talked almost 2 years ago when I wrote to you about the theory that, so we know our quadrant of the galaxy is heating up. We know that there is you and I talked about how there was this, you explained it to me, it was this basically, there's this increase in temperature in the what they call it, the background microwave radiation. So could this be also a cause that because of this increase of heat, I don't know, all the planets seem to be heating up, could that be contributing as well to the reduction of our magnetopause?
Well, what it shows is that the fact that all the planets are being affected is that it's something that has changed in our solar system, not just something that has changed on our planet. In other words, it's not caused by human activity in any way.
Right, right.
It's caused by changes in our solar system. And at the time that they were saying that these planets were warming up, they were saying that our sun had become stronger, or in a way.
I remember that.
We know now that's not possible because our sun has been weakening. So we cannot blame the sun either for the fact that all the planets are warming up. What we are left with is that something else has changed in our solar system. And we know what that is. It's the incoming stars, old stars that have come in and affected our sun and affected the whole solar system.
We got to have, can you come on next week?
Sure, if you
like. I'll email you and we get that. Brenda, are you still there?
I am listening very attentively. I think, again, I think Dr. Albers has a fabulous ability to describe these things in understandable terms for those of us who are not PhDs in, biochemistry or physics.
Listen, I feel at times I feel like I should be sending her a tuition check.
Well, I enjoy doing this. I enjoy explaining things, and I think all physicists should be able to talk in a way that is understandable to everybody. And I think that if they are not able to explain physical concepts in simple language, then they do not understand the concepts themselves.
Wow. All right. You know what? That's the point to all of this, is the fact that ignorance is the killer. And I love the fact that because you've taught me basic mathematic concepts. Now, I don't understand the, mathematical formulas, but I don't have to. That's why you have the PhD. I don't need it, but I can learn. And so let's just do this. Maybe next Tuesday, maybe you and I can come on, and would love to come in here and pick up from this topic, because I think that a lot of us, where Planet X is concerned about what's happening to our solar system, that if we could understand that the solar system is not this nice little neat package that everyone thinks of, the 8 planets that are out there, and we just go about our merry way. It's a very complex, I call it an organism. Is that wrong, Dr. Albers? I mean, that's what I see our solar system as.
Nothing wrong with that. I've recently made discoveries, and I discovered that galaxies are giving birth to other galaxies, and stars are fissioning into other stars. It's not at all like we've been told. And what does it look like? It looks like celestial bodies are reproducing like life on Earth.
Wow.
So
Wow.
that's what we've come to. And people say, but how could God do this? And I say, well, if God made life on Earth so that it reproduces, why shouldn't he do the same thing with the rest of the universe? Why is it so surprising?
Yeah. And why do we have to think if we can go from the quantum, why can't we go to the gigantium? I mean, I mean,
I would agree. I think it makes sense if you have a mirror image at the macrocosmic level going down to the microcosmic.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the simple answer to why would God do that is he's way more creative than we are. That's why.
you see, and I got to tell you, folks, this is just our Wayne Steiger's perspective. But my feeling is that I don't like the reincarnation concept, but I do like the fact that if I can pass the finish line in this reality, maybe I get to be a star next time, you know? I mean, seriously, if they're being born out there, I could really dig that. Think about that, Claudia.
Yeah.
That would be a 10 billion year lifespan. Brenda, I could go for that.
I'm sure.
Tiger, a star is born. Go for it.
Yeah, I'm talking about, my star. Y'all have just been so great.
I feel like I need to start singing Evergreen or something now, Wayne.
Exactly. I know. I'm hearing Barbara Streisand, and So, well, Dr. Albers, thank you for coming on in such short notice. I mean,
you're very welcome.
It's just an honor just to always have you here, but to come on this short notice. So Tuesday, let's plan on you and I, and Brenda, you're welcome to come on this as well. The discussion I think we need to continue, that I'd like to continue. Let's talk about the defines of what is a magnetic pole reversal.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it definitely, how I see this, ladies, is that it's a spoke. You've got the center core, but there is just so much that is attached to it.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah. And it's impacting us. It's impacting our species.
Definitely.
Well, thank you. So there's 333 people watching.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful.
Good number.
Well, Brenda, I want to say thank you to you for your wonderful research. I would think we should continue to monitor this. Dr. Albers, I want to thank you for coming on with such short notice and giving us some clarity on some of the points. I think that's how we begin to correct ignorance, is to have a teacher say, well, it's not quite right, but this is the way you're going, because we all benefit from that.
Absolutely.
Well, all right, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this extended edition of the Friday Night Live show. We're going to get next Tuesday. We'll get Dr. Albers on here, and that's going to be a fun conversation. Sunday night, 7 o'clock, normal time, Mary Rodwell will be coming on. She'll be live from Australia. So that is going to be fun. UFOs and abductees, Dr. Albers.
Very interesting.
Yeah, so it should be fun. All right, everyone. Thank you. I appreciate y'all coming on. Thank you, everyone. Be kind to one another. We'll see you probably tomorrow night. It got really crazy here taking care of my wife, but that's what good husbands do. You take care of your wives. It is sickness and health. And you know what? My wife, who is a nurse, gave me the best compliment, ladies. She said, actually, I'd make a very good nurse.
Wow.
So, there you go. All right. Big hugs to all of you. Thank you, folks. Both of y'all stay on here before we get out. All right, everyone. We'll see you pretty soon. All right. Be good. And